welcome back to another update on my RPG Meaningful Choice devlog. This is episode number 2. I'm just going to show you what I've got because I put together the opening title sequence. So far in the distant future, there is a prisoner who resides in a special prison. So we're going to big establishing shot of Black Hole. These graphics will probably be updated, probably polished up a little bit more, but this is just so I can get an idea of the flow. So you can see the ship just kind of on a sine wave, bouncing back and forward. So we cut into a bigger close-up just to keep the shots a little bit more interesting. And I haven't finalized this yet. Got a clean wipe, and then we've got the comms. And then we get to the cell of the prisoner. Bit of screen shake, falls out of bed, walks over to the door, has a look out, then it's chapter 1. And this is where it becomes playable. So what's changed from the last episode? I've added a little bit more polish. We've got a computer here. This is now carpeted with this kind of logo, which I think is going to be to do with Orion. I'm not sure. I like the design of it, but that's probably something I'm going to think about later on. You can walk up to these computers. If you get to the right one, it requests a password. So you've got to basically go find the password. There's a computer out here. This one says system offline. So you got to find, it's basically a little puzzle. It's not too difficult. If you come over here, there's a cabinet that's open. You can pick up a key card, and then you can head back with the key card, and then system offline, password obtained, the computer turns on. And then when you've got the password, you can come down to this one, which then says access granted, and then you get a cutscene here. Well, not a cutscene, but it takes you to another section, which is basically inside the computer terminal. And here you can go into system control, build log, games. So the idea here is to turn off the camera. So you can go into system control and then security cameras. Then you get the option to disable zone 1 or all cameras. You can disable it, go back. No records in the build log, but I have put in a game and you can play it, and you can see on the top right there's a high score. I've already been playing it, and the player will get to play this whenever they reach a computer terminal in the game. Different terminals will have a different selection of games that you can play, and then all your high scores will be kept and saved. So when you play again, if you save the game and come back and play later, your high scores will be remembered. And that'll be like a mini game within the game, which I think will be quite nice. Now we've turned off that camera. The camera's now deactivated. You can see there's a red light on top. I'll just show you the event sheets for the opening sequences. So for the first one, I've just got this layout here with if I unlock these, with these sprites that I've made, which just overlap each other. They're exactly the same sprite, one's just bigger than the other, and I overlap them. And then I've got the black hole and the spaceship. The spaceship has the sign behavior on it, and it just bobs left and right around the black hole. And then on the event sheet for that, it's basically just a hierarchy of commands from, setting the layout scale, which is basically means it's zoomed out, and then the fade from black function, which I made in a separate event sheet and set to a global, and then a wait, and then it brings in the text, waits for the text to run, then says the next text, and it's basically just a sequence of change the text, wait, change the text, wait. And this is the next layout. So we've got the prisoner in his cell on his bed. So I've designed the character here quite simply based on the original mock-ups that I made. I've changed him slightly in terms of the leather strapping around and his mask, and then in his idle animation he just does a little head bob up and down. And then I've got a fall out of bed animation, which basically is him rolling over and then landing on the floor, and then a get up animation, which is turning over and then standing up. Get rid of those. It's just these two little sprites here, so all it is a little box here which I've got for normal, and then for the alarm I've set it on that same two darker reds and then one lighter red sequence, which is the same as the alarm system in layout 1. I've just duplicated that twice and just put them over the tops of the doors where the windows would be. There's a camera sprite, although we're not moving anywhere, we just need that to act as the screen shake. And then obviously I've made the layout bigger than the viewport so we can get that screen shake in there. Then we wait half a second, we play the fall out of bed animation. We wait 0.3 seconds and then we set the state to get up. And again, I've given him states like I did with the other players over here, just so I can coordinate that with what's going on in the event sheet. And then I've got down on here, if his state equals these things, do these actions on there, like set his X value, set his walks animation, and move him left towards the screen. So you can see here when he's walking, every tick of the game, every frame, I just set him to himself -1 frame, and then on the Y -0.1, and then that makes him walk left and slightly up. And I've just worked out how long that needs to last for in order for him to get to the door. And he just does that all by himself. So just for interacting with this computer, I've got that entire folder there, and that's all the layouts in terms of when we go into that computer system. So if we go into computer system 1, it's just a black layout, exactly the same size as the viewport, and I've just got the text and I've got the icon just there. And I've got a global variable which keeps track of what page I'm on, because obviously each page has a different number of options. So there's 4 on the first screen, but when you get to system control, if I do it over here, if you get to system control, you've only got 2. So I've solved that by tracking which page I'm on using that global variable. So depending on what that says will determine how far down I can go and how far up I can go with the arrows. So this is the game itself, so all the game logic is in this event sheet here. So I've got 4 global variables which tracks the score, the high score, and the whether or not the player is playing, or whether or not we're on the game over screen. Because whether we're playing or not playing, the buttons are going to do different things, and I want to know as well at any point whether we are in the game over screen or not, so that we don't start creating conflicts with the buttons. So on the start of the layout, I set space attack playing to false because we're not playing when we first load the game. Set the score back to 0, so that's not the high score, that's just the current score of that current game. We always set that to 0 when the player starts. And then what we do after we put all of this other stuff in and set these groups to deactivated, is we check the local storage. And this is how you set and manage a local high score system. So whatever system the player is playing on in their house or their home, this will then store that high score variable to their computer's storage, if that makes sense. So the first thing we do when we load the layout is check that there is a high score that exists in the game, and then if there does, you can come down here. So if we check and the high score does exist, then we basically get that item high score, and then when we've got it, we set that item to the space attack high score variable here. So it will look and see if there is a score in the game that's a high score. If it's the first time they're playing it, obviously that won't exist, so it will just bypass all of that, because this will come back no, and then this won't even run. If they have played it before, there will be a high score, and it will just find what that is and then assign it back to the global variable. Under the ship's controls, it's really simple. A and D to move left and right. I've set a maximum distance that the ship can move to the left and to the right, and I've got a tilt right and a tilt left animation on it as well. So if I double click it, I've got just the standard frame there, tilt left, which is basically just a redrawn one single frame, so it looks like he's tilting to the left, and then one that looks like he's tilting to the right, just to give the game a little bit more polish. I just set those animations, and I've given him the 8 directional behavior, but I've only set it to left and right in the behaviors, in the properties, sorry, and then the maximum speed. Then if we go down here, I've got a function called enemy death, and I needed this because there's quite a lot of enemies in the game. What was happening when I first put the script in is I'd be shooting one enemy, and then because they were all the instances themselves, it was destroying all the enemies on the screen. So I needed to put a function in that allowed me to determine which one it was that I was actually attacking and killing. So this is what that looks like. It's called enemy death, and I've given it one perimeter which is called enemy ID, and then in a sub event underneath we've got the, if I drag this out here, we've got the sprite for the enemies, and then we pick that by instance with UID. So we pick it based on this one here, this UID, because although we're using instances of the same sprite, they're all going to have their own unique ID. So we're going to pick our enemy based on that number, and then we're going to spawn in the particles. When they die, we're going to destroy just that one, and then we're going to add 10 to the score. So then when we call that function, we have to put in the perimeter, and then all I do is call that sprite instance followed by .uid, and then that recognizes which one the bullet has hit when it collides and destroys just that one instance of it. Hopefully that made sense. And then I've got a player death function, which is a lot more simple, and it's basically just what happens when the player dies. When the player dies, I've got a sub event here which basically sets the high score. So when we die, we set the local storage of high score to space attack high score. So at the end of the game it gets set. I've got a level up system on the game, so if we play it quickly and I actually try and do well, once I go past 100 points I level up, and then once I get past the next there we go, level up, and you can see my level in the top left. 330, I think it's 400 the next one. Yeah, and you can see I level up again. And the way that works is like this. So space attack scoring. So system, if the space attack score is under 100, I set the ship's level to 0, and again that's a variable on here. I've got him just level, and it's a number. He starts at level 0. When we're under 100 we set it to 0. If the score is between 100 and 200, I set the ship's level to level 1, and then I trigger once the level up function, and that's basically set the text on the screen, which is in there somewhere. We set that text just to say level up. We wait 1 second and then we make it disappear, so we set that text to nothing. So it just flashes on for a second and then disappears. That's that level up. And I've got a white sprite which covers the screen which I flash on at the same point. So when the score goes past those levels here, 100 to 200 level 1, and then 200 to 400 set it to level 2. So every time the ship's level increases, it triggers that level up function, which then flashes on. And then what that does to the enemies is it just makes them spawn faster and more frequently. So if the score's at level 1, if the ship score is at level 1, then every 2 seconds we repeat twice and we create an enemy on an invisible line up, basically up here, in between that width and that height. We do it twice, and we create them at a random spot, but it's not totally random. What I've done is I've selected only specific coordinates that are exactly 16 pixels apart, so that way they don't start overlapping, side by side like this and start looking really messy. They're only going to be in this invisible grid, which will be around each other here. And I've done that again by just saying that it's going to choose a position, either 88, 104 all the way up to 132, and then it can be 3 levels high from 0, 16 and 32. So it's going to pick one of those coordinates, it's going to do it twice, and it's going to spawn 2 in, and it's going to set the animation frame of the enemy to 0, because on level 1 all the enemies are going to look, they're all going to look like that, which is borderline copyright infringement, I know. But for now it's okay, it's fine. I don't think it's exactly like the Space Invaders ones. I haven't even looked at it, I just drew that from memory. And then frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, 4 and 5. So for the when we're at level 1, it's all going to be just those ones. That's all we're going to get. And then what I want to do to add variety is, as we progress through the levels, we can now choose 0 or 1. So it's either going to be one of those two. And then when you get to level 3, you can have a variable in terms of another type of enemy dropping down, and then all the way down to level 8. I've only done 8 levels because, quite frankly, it's so hard. And I got that 2000 plus score. I think I was only at level 5, so I don't see anybody getting past level 8. If you do, if you end up playing it, please let me know, because that would be amazing. That's basically how the game works so far. That's all I've got to update today. I'll see you next Friday for another update. I'm going to keep working on it, and I'll see you in the next devlog.